Welcome back to the Ancestral Findings podcast. When you sit down to write about an ancestor, you may have a stack of records in front of you: census pages, deeds, wills, church registers, military files, photographs, letters, old family notes, maybe even a faded Bible record with handwriting that takes you a few minutes to read. You may have the facts. But then comes the hard part. How do you turn those facts into something another person will actually want to hear? That's where many family historians get stuck. We can spend hours finding records. We can track a person across counties, across state lines, and across generations. We can compare spellings, study witnesses, and follow land descriptions. But when it comes time to write the story, we sometimes fall back into listing facts. Born here, married there, moved here, died there, buried there. That kind of information is important, but by itself, it doesn't always help the listener care about the person. A strong family history narrative does something more. It helps people see the life behind the record. It guides them through a person's world. It explains where they lived, who surrounded them, what choices they faced, and how the events of their time shaped the direction of their life. That doesn't mean turning genealogy into fiction. We don't need to invent scenes, private thoughts, or conversations that never appeared in a letter or diary. We don't need to make our ancestors more dramatic than they were. The real story is usually strong enough. The work is learning how to tell it clearly. Before you begin writing, start with one clear subject. This may sound obvious, but it's one of the easiest places to get lost. One ancestor can lead you in every direction at once. You begin with one man in a census record, and soon you're following his parents, his siblings, his wife's family, his neighbors, his land records, his church, his military service, and the county history of 3 different states. That may all be useful research, but it probably doesn't all belong in the same story. So ask yourself, what is this piece really about? Maybe it's about your ancestors' move from Virginia to Kentucky. Maybe it's about a grandmother's early life. Maybe it's about a family farm, a Civil War pension file, an immigration story, or the mystery behind a changed surname. Choose the subject before you begin, then stay close to it. You don't have to use every record you found. In fact, you probably shouldn't. Good storytelling often comes from choosing the right details, not from including every detail. Think of yourself as a guide. You're not dumping the whole box of records onto the table and asking the listener to sort through it. You're walking them through the path you've already found. That also means knowing the difference between a report and a story. A research report explains what you searched, what you found, what you didn't find, and what conclusion the evidence supports. That kind of writing is valuable. It's especially important when you're solving a difficult genealogical problem. But a family history narrative has a different purpose. It still needs to be accurate. It still needs sources. It still needs careful wording. But it should carry the listener through a life in a natural way. A report might say John Miller appeared in the census in Ohio, then in Indiana, then in Illinois. A narrative might say, across 3 census records, we can follow John Miller's family as they moved west. First, they were in Ohio. 10 years later, they had crossed into Indiana. By the next census, they were in Illinois, farther from their earlier roots and closer to the farmland that would shape the next generation. Both versions use the same evidence. But the second version gives the listener a movement. It helps them understand that these weren't just entries on 3 census pages. This was a family on the move. That's what you're looking for. Don't just tell people what the record says. Help them understand what the record means. Records are the foundation of the story, but the person should stay at the center. A census record can tell you where someone lived, but it may also tell you who lived with them, what kind of work they did, whether they owned property, whether they could read, whether relatives lived nearby, and how the household changed over time. A land deed can tell you that someone bought or sold property, but it may also tell you when a family was preparing to move, who their neighbors were, and how they fit into a larger community. A probate file can tell you that someone died, but it may also name children, reveal debts, show the value of possessions, and give you a glimpse of what the family had to settle after the death. Those are the pieces that help a listener understand the life. Instead of saying, Mary Johnson appeared in the 1880 census in rural Ohio. You might say, by 1880, Mary Johnson was living in rural Ohio with her husband and 4 children. Several families with the same surname lived close by, which suggests her household may have been part of a larger family network. Those nearby relatives may have helped with farm labor, childcare, church life, and the daily needs of the household. That kind of writing does more than repeat the record. It helps the listener step into the setting. And setting is one of the most powerful tools in family history writing. No ancestor lived apart from the world around them. They lived under the laws of their time. They traveled by the roads, rivers, wagons, trains, or ships available to them. They worked in the economy around them. They worshipped in local churches. They dealt with illness, weather, war, debt, migration, land prices, inheritance rules, and community pressure. When you place an ancestor in that world, the story becomes much easier to understand. If your ancestor moved west in the early 19th century, explain what drew families in that direction. Was land cheaper? Were relatives already there? Did a new road open the region? Were older farms being divided among too many heirs? If your family lived in a mining town, describe what mining meant for work, housing, danger, and daily life. If a widow appears in probate and guardianship records, explain what the law allowed her to do and what it did not allow her to do in that place and time. The setting should never feel like a long history lesson dropped into the middle of the story. It should help explain the family's life. The goal isn't to decorate the narrative. The goal is to help the listener understand the world your ancestor had to live in. A clear timeline is also essential. Most family history stories work best when the listener can follow the order of events without effort. They shouldn't have to stop and ask, wait, did this happen before the marriage or after it? Was this before the move or after the move? Was the father still living at that time? A life story often begins with birth, parentage, or the earliest known record. Then it moves through childhood, marriage, work, children, migration, later years, death, and estate records. But you don't always have to begin at the beginning. Sometimes the best opening comes from a turning point. You might begin with an ancestor selling land, or standing before a court, or boarding a ship, or enlisting in the army, or appearing for the first time in a record after years of silence. Then, after you have the listener's attention, you can step back and explain how the person arrived at that moment. For example, instead of opening with James Wilson was born in Tennessee, you might begin this way. When James Wilson sold his land in Tennessee, he was preparing to move his family away from the county where several generations had lived. The deed was more than a property record. It marked the beginning of a move that would change the family's future. That gives the listener a reason to keep going. Why did he leave? Where did he go? What happened to the family after the move? Those questions create forward motion. As you write, look for turning points. A land sale may signal a move, a probate file may reveal a death, a remarriage may change the household, a military enlistment may separate a young man from his family, a lawsuit may expose conflict between relatives, a church dismissal may suggest migration, a newspaper notice may reveal financial trouble. These moments are often where the story changes direction. When you find one, slow down. Explain what changed. Who was affected? What record shows it? And what happened next? That helps you avoid writing a flat list of facts. It gives the narrative shape. Another important skill is knowing which details to include. Family historians collect a lot of information. That's part of the work. But not every census entry, tax list, deed, cemetery note, and newspaper mention needs to appear in the main story. If you include everything, the story may begin to sound like a research log. The listener may lose sight of the person. Choose details that carry the story forward. Instead of writing a separate paragraph for every census record, you might summarize the pattern. From 1850 through 1880, the census records showed the family remaining in the same county while the household changed around them. Older children married and left home. Younger children appeared. By 1880, Sarah's widowed mother was living with them, adding another generation to the household. That gives the meaning of the records without slowing the story. Save deeper detail for the records that prove something important, such as a relationship, a migration, a maiden name, an estate settlement, or a military connection. And when you mention a record, explain why it counts. Your listener may not know why a tax list, marriage bond, land deed, or probate packet is important. A tax list may place an ancestor in a county before the next surviving census. A marriage witness may point to a sibling, neighbor, or future in-law. A probate file may name children who appear nowhere else. A land deed may show exactly when a family left one county and entered another. Don't just name the source. Explain what it does. You might say, the 1826 tax list is important because it places Daniel in the county 4 years before the next surviving census. Without that list, his arrival would appear later than it probably was. Or you might say, the witness on the marriage bond may be a clue to Rebecca's family. He appears again in nearby land records, close to the household where Rebecca and her husband later lived. That kind of explanation brings the listener into the research process without overwhelming them. It also builds trust, and trust is especially important when the evidence is incomplete. Every family history has gaps. Some records were never created, some were lost, some were destroyed, some ancestors left very little behind. Others appear under several spellings, mistaken ages, nicknames, or names that changed from one record to the next. Good writing doesn't hide uncertainty. It explains it. Use careful wording when the evidence isn't complete. Words like possibly, likely, the record suggests, and no record has yet been found help keep your writing honest. You might say, the record suggests that Elizabeth may have been the daughter of James Carter, but no birth record has been found. The strongest clues are her marriage bond, the land transactions involving Carter heirs, and the fact that she named her eldest son James. That tells the listener what is known, what remains uncertain, and why the conclusion is reasonable. This is especially important with online family trees. Once a guess is written as fact, it can spread quickly. Careful wording protects your work. Family stories need the same care. Family stories can be valuable. They may preserve clues about migration, military service, religion, adoption, hardship, family conflict, or an ancestor's character. Many good discoveries begin with something passed down at the kitchen table, but stories change over time. Names get mixed up, places shift, one person's experience gets attached to another person. A small event grows larger with each retelling. You can include family stories, but label them clearly. For example, family tradition says that Robert left Tennessee after a disagreement over land. No court record has been found to confirm the dispute, but the timing of his move matches a period when several related families sold property and left the county. That respects the story without presenting it as proven fact. When records support a family story, say so. When they don't, say that too. At the same time, be careful not to invent private thoughts or conversations. A family history narrative should be readable, but it should not become fiction unless you clearly label it that way. You may know that an ancestor moved after a spouse died. You may suspect that the move was painful or difficult. But unless a letter, diary, oral history, court record, or newspaper account gives that detail, don't write as if you know exactly what the person felt. Instead of saying, Sarah looked around the farm one last time and wondered how she would survive without him, you could say, after her husband's death, Sarah remained in the records as head of the household. The probate file shows that she had legal and financial decisions to face while still caring for children at home. That version is still human. It still gives weight to her situation, but it stays grounded in evidence. One of the most important improvements you can make in family history writing is to give women their full place in the story. Many older family histories focus heavily on men because men often appear more often in land records, tax records, military files, and court records, but women shape the family just as deeply. Look for women in marriage records, dower releases, wills, probate files, church minutes, pension files, guardianship records, cemetery records, letters, newspapers, and the records of their children. A woman's identity may be hidden behind married names, but that doesn't mean her story is gone. Pay close attention to widows. A widow's records can reveal property, children, legal rights, family connections, and economic pressure. Pension files can be especially rich because they may include testimony about marriage, children, residence, hardship, and community memory. Don't reduce a woman to wife of when the records allow you to say more. Write about where she lived, what she faced, whether she moved, whether she remarried, whether she appeared in church or court records, and how her life connected generations. Children also deserve attention. In family history, children often appear as names in a list, but they were part of the household story. They worked, moved, attended school, joined churches, lost parents, gained step-parents, became apprentices, inherited property, and sometimes died young. A child's record can also solve a larger family question. A death certificate may name a mother's maiden name. A marriage record may identify a parent. A guardianship file may prove that a father died before a certain date. A school record may place the family in a township between census years. You don't need a full section on every child, but include children where they affect the story. If a family moved with 8 children, that tells us something about the weight of the move. If several children died young, that shaped the household. If one child stayed behind while others moved west, that may point to land ties, marriage connections, or a family strategy. Children help show the household as a living family, not just a line of descent. Names also need care. Names can confuse listeners quickly, especially in families where the same names repeat. Many counties had several men named John, William, James, or Thomas from the same family line, living near one another at the same time. Women may appear under maiden names, married names, nicknames, and second married names. Introduce each person clearly. Say John Miller, the son of Peter Miller, or Mary Ann Carter, who later appears in the records as Mary Ann Wilson. If a maiden name is unknown, say that it is unknown. If a maiden name is suspected but not proven, explain the evidence. Also pay attention to spelling. Historical records often spell names in different ways. Choose one spelling for the main narrative, then mention variations when they affect the research. You might say, the surname appears as McCarty, McCarthy, and McCarty in different records. For clarity, this account uses McCarty, the spelling found in the family's later records. That keeps the listener from getting lost. Plain language is another key. You don't need complicated wording to sound professional. Clear writing is stronger. Instead of saying the aforementioned individual subsequently relocated to the adjoining jurisdiction, say he later moved to the neighboring county. Instead of saying the decedent's estate proceedings provide evidence of familial relationships, to say the probate file helps identify his children. Plain language keeps the focus on the ancestor. It also makes your work easier to read out loud. If a sentence has too many names, dates, and places, break it into 2 sentences. If a paragraph tries to do too much, divide it. If the listener has to work too hard to follow the sentence needs repair. The opening of your story deserves special attention. The first few lines should give people a reason to keep listening. A weak opening only announces the subject. This is the story of my 3rd great-grandfather, James Wilson. That may be true, but it doesn't pull the listener in. A stronger opening gives us movement, mystery, conflict, discovery, or change. When James Wilson sold his land in Tennessee, he was preparing to move his family away from the county where several generations had lived. The deed was more than a property record. It marked the beginning of a move that would reshape the family's future. That opening gives the listener a moment to enter the story. You don't need to be dramatic. You just need to begin with a detail that points somewhere. The ending deserves the same care. Many family histories end with a death date and a burial place. Those details are important, but they don't always make the strongest final note. After you cover the death, ask what remained. Did the children stay in the area or move away? Did the family farm continue? Did descendants preserve a Bible, photograph, letter, or story? Did the estate file reveal relationships that would otherwise be lost? Did one person's choices shape later generations? A strong ending gives the listener closure. It doesn't need to be sentimental. It should help them understand why the life was worth writing about. For example, many parts of Rebecca's life remain undocumented, but the records that survive show a woman who crossed state lines, raised children through years of change, and remained connected to a family network that carried her name forward. Her paper trail is thin, but it is enough to bring her back into the family's memory. That kind of ending leaves the listener with a person, not just a date. Revision is where the story becomes clear. The first draft is where you gather the story. The revision is where you shape it. Read your draft out loud. That's one of the best ways to find trouble. You'll hear repeated words, awkward phrases, missing transitions, and places where the timeline feels confusing. You may notice that one section has too much record detail while another section needs more explanation. Check every name, date, and place. Make sure relationships are clear. Make sure uncertain conclusions are labeled carefully. Make sure the narrative doesn't claim more than the evidence supports. Then look at the flow. Does each paragraph lead naturally to the next? Does the opening make people want to continue? Does the ending give the story a strong close? Good revision can turn a crowded research summary into a polished family narrative. It also helps to keep research notes separate from the story. While you write, new questions will appear. A witness's name may seem important, a land description may need a map, a neighbor may share a surname, a record may raise doubts about a birth year or relationship. Don't stop writing every time a new question appears. Keep a separate note file beside the draft. Add the question there, then continue writing. That lets you finish the narrative while still saving future research leads. Your story should not include every loose end unless that loose end helps the listener understand the account. The research notes can hold theories, searches, questions, and possible next steps. The narrative should give the listener a clear account of what you know now. Sources also need a place. Sources allow others to verify your work and continue the research later. They also show that the narrative is based on evidence, not guesswork. For a website article, you might include a source list at the end. You might use footnotes if your site handles them cleanly. You might mention the record type in the paragraph and give fuller details below the article. The approach may vary, but don't skip sources completely. Even a basic source list is better than leaving people with no way to trace the information. Your source list might include census records, deed books, probate files, military records, cemetery records, newspapers, church books, local histories, maps, and family papers. Give enough detail so someone else can find the record. Finally, remember this: an ancestor doesn't have to be famous to be worth writing about. Most people in our family trees lived ordinary lives. They worked. They worshiped. They raised children. They moved when they had to. They cared for relatives. They faced loss. They made decisions that shaped the next generation. Those lives deserve careful attention. A farm family's move from one county to another can explain how later generations spread across the country. A widow's probate file can reveal hardship, property, children, and family structure. A church record can show belonging. A land deed can show ambition, pressure, or the hope of a fresh start. History didn't only happen in capitals, battlefields, and famous homes. It happened in kitchens, fields, churches, workshops, courthouses, wagons, ships, and small towns. It happened in the lives of the people whose names appear in your family tree. When you write their stories well, you give your relatives something they can understand, share, and preserve. You also give future researchers a better starting point. You're not just saving names and dates, you're helping a life become readable again. That's the real value of a compelling family history narrative. If you've got a hard-to-find ancestor you're stuck on, I'd love to hear about it. Just head over to ancestralfindings.com and click on Contact to send me a message. While you're there, take advantage of our free weekly genealogy lookups. Explore thousands of articles and enjoy hundreds of podcast episodes. We've been helping family history researchers since 1995. And if you're looking for even more, check out our Genealogy Gold Q&A series over on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy searching.